second learning goal, which is to examine research on conversational turns and the impact that they have on language, vocabulary, social emotional development, brain development and structure, and IQ. So this is going to be eye-opening for you. And at the end of this part of the training, I want you to reflect upon what was really surprising about all of this and what was validating. Maybe you already kind of knew this information and were using it to support your instruction with students. So what was shocking or surprising and what was validating? Think about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's called the Lena study. And everything here is linked on these slides. And so if you'd like to explore this further, you can do that. But the Lena study and the results that were found in that study enhance what's known as the Hart and Risley related research. And Hart and Risley basically, their research portrayed the significant gap that kids come into school with based on the number of words and vocabulary words that they've heard since birth. And the more quality vocabulary and language they're exposed to, the more quickly they'll continue to pick things up. And if we have students who aren't exposed to that, the gap just continues to get wider as they get older. So the Lena study enhanced this research, and using Lena technology, researchers have reported that conversational turns, which is what you saw that father and that son in that video, are predictive of language and social emotional development, as well as brain structure and function and IQ scores in middle school. Conversational turns have also been shown to be predictive of children's vocabulary skills in preschool settings specifically. So let's dive into this a little bit more. So what these results found is that ideally, we want to have 40 conversational turns per hour with a child. And this correlates with higher IQs. That may seem like a lot, but really it's doable, okay? Parents achieving 40 turns per hour are not talking nonstop all day. It's actually a formidable but attainable goal. An increase of 2 turns per hour actually ties to a 1-point increase in IQ by middle school. So perhaps, if they're on technology or watching TV, could we tweak some of our habits to try to increase some of our conversations with our child to really hone in on that, because that is pretty significant. And then a really key window of time between 1.5 and 2 years old is a key window of time for this adult to child interaction. So whether your child is, at a early learning center or a daycare or with you at home, you really want to make sure you are trying to get these conversational turns in, especially in that key window of time. So this infographic comes from Lena, and it just conveys that learning to read and write starts earlier than you think. And conversational turns actually help children to talk, starting with infants. They start saying sounds and babbling, and then they eventually start connecting these sounds to words as they become a toddler, and then words become sentences. And then as they develop this language, this is going to help them to read and to write. So when they get into preschool, they're able to distinguish between individual sounds. That's what's called phoneme awareness. And then they take that knowledge and apply it to reading and spelling words in kindergarten. And then finally, they're connecting words in the early grades and reading and writing sentences. So this is an article that comes from Lena, which is really powerful. And if you work in a early childhood center or child care center, I highly recommend you take the time to read it. It is linked here on the slides, and it's quite shocking. It really emphasizes that every interaction counts in early childhood education. And as you're reading, I'd like you to consider three very important points and then maybe the most valuable point. Okay. Um, but to give you an idea of what this says, ultimately, and to no fault of their own, we know that the ratios in childcare centers, there are more children to the adults in the room. Therefore, children are less likely to have individual conversations with an adult who is intentional in their language and vocabulary and sentence structure. So some kids may not initiate it at all, okay, and then they have what's known as kind of language isolation. So this really highlights the statistics and research that goes into that in early childhood centers, and really shows you when certain variables change, what happens to their language development as a result. So I encourage you to dive into that and pause this video if this is something you are interested in. So now that we've dived into the research a little bit, again, I'd like for you to process in a way that works for you. You can think about this, you can discuss it if you're watching this with colleagues, you can write about it or illustrate it in order to demonstrate your understanding. So, what surprised you from some of this research and what validated your thinking?